Was it possible for a man who spent his whole life with a gun in his hand to be worthy of love at the end? That question weighed heavy in the air the day Frank Wesley rode into Redemption Creek. The sun was setting behind the rocky hills of Colorado Territory, turning the sky red like a bleeding wound as Frank's tired stallion reached the small frontier town. Dust clung to his coat, his breathing was rough, and every step of his horse showed how weak he had become. Frank Wesley was known in many places, from Dodge City to Tombstone. People whispered his name in saloons and around campfires. Some said he had killed 20 men. Others claimed it was closer to 50. But legends never carried the truth of a man's heart. At 42 years old, Frank was a shadow of who he used to be. The doctor in Denver had given him 6 months to live. Consumption had slowly taken his lungs, and an old bullet lodged near his heart burned with pain every time he breathed. 6 months if he was lucky. Frank had never been lucky. He had come to Redemption Creek for one reason only. He wanted a quiet place to die, far from the noise of his past. A place where nobody knew his name. He pushed open the doors of the Crooked Nail Saloon. The wooden floor creaked as he walked to the bar. His hand shook as he placed his empty glass down. "Another," Frank said with a rough voice. The bartender, a big man with arms like tree trunks, frowned as he wiped a glass. "That's your fourth, mister. You celebrating or trying to forget something?" Frank almost smiled. "Guess I'm doing both." He lifted the glass when it was filled, to dying alone. "Feels like that's the only ending a man like me deserves." The bartender shook his head. "Nobody deserves to die alone." "Some do," Frank said softly. "Some surely do." By the next evening, the whole town knew about the stranger staying in room 4 at Mrs. Hudson's boarding house, a dying gunslinger with a dark past. People peered through windows to see him when he passed. Children whispered stories. Men warned their wives to stay away. Everyone agreed on one thing. Men like Frank Wesley always died alone. 3 days later, a train stopped at Redemption Creek's small station, letting out a single passenger. A woman in an emerald green traveling dress stepped onto the dusty platform. She stood out like a fresh spring leaf in a land of dry, brown grass. She was 28 years old, with chestnut brown hair under a simple hat and a silver locket resting against her chest. Her name was Sophia Nalin. "Can I help you with your bags, ma'am?" the station attendant asked. "Yes, thank you," she said with a gentle smile. Her voice carried a slight Eastern accent. "I'm looking for Mrs. Hudson's boarding house." "Down the main street. 2-story white building with blue shutters," he said. He looked curious. "Not many folks come here dressed fine as you. What brings you to Redemption Creek?" "I've come to start a school. I heard there are children here with no proper lessons." It wasn't a lie. Sophia was a trained teacher. But the letter in her bag told a different reason for her visit. A letter written by a doctor in Denver. A letter that carried a name she thought was gone forever. Mrs. Hudson greeted her warmly, surprised to see a woman from the East alone. Sophia asked for a room at the back of the house. "There's only one room back there," Mrs. Hudson warned, "next to a man who's very ill. Might not be proper for a lady." "I'm not afraid of illness," Sophia said quietly. "I worked as a nurse during the war." Mrs. Hudson paused, then nodded. "As you wish. Room 5. That night, long after the lamps were out and the town fell quiet, Frank woke choking on his own breath. A painful cough tore through him. He reached the wash basin just in time to spit blood into it. His hand shook as he held the edge of the table. A soft knock came at the door. "Who's there?" Frank called, grabbing the revolver under his pillow out of habit. "Your neighbor," a calm woman's voice answered. "I heard you coughing. I'm a nurse. I can help." "I'm fine, ma'am. Just a spell. Go back to sleep." Silence. He thought she left. Then she spoke again. "I have laudanum and willow bark tea. It will ease your pain." He hesitated. The pain was unbearable tonight. Finally, he unlocked the door halfway. Sophia stood in the dim light of the hallway wearing a modest nightdress and a wool shawl. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She held a small medical kit. Her eyes, the color of spring grass, studied him with kindness he did not understand. "You shouldn't be helping strange men in the night," Frank said. "Not proper." "Propriety matters little when someone is suffering," she said gently. "May I come in?" He stepped back. She entered with quiet confidence. As she prepared a mixture and handed it to him, Frank watched her carefully. "Why help me?" he asked. "You don't know me." "I know pain when I see it," she said. "Drink." He did. The bitter drink eased his coughing. She opened his window a little. "Fresh air helps the lungs." "You'll catch cold," he muttered. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Wesley." He stared at her. "How do you know my name?" "You said it when I knocked." She gathered her things. "Rest with your head raised. I'll check on you tomorrow." She left before he could thank her. In the hallway, Sophia leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. His face was thinner, older, tired, but those eyes were the same eyes she had known 15 years ago. He didn't recognize her. Maybe that was best, for now. She held the letter close to her heart, the letter that said, "Miss Nayland, he is dying in Redemption Creek. He speaks your name in his fever dreams." The next morning, Frank found a small tray outside his door, a pot of willow bark tea, a note. "Drink it hot. S.N." At breakfast, Sophia sat alone. Frank chose a corner table. Mrs. Hudson fussed over him, saying he looked pale. Sophia approached his table. "May I sit, Mr. Wesley? I'd like to discuss your treatment." "There is no treatment," he said, "only waiting for the end." "So you've accepted death?" she asked softly. "What choice do I have?" "There is always a choice in how we face what comes," she said. Frank studied her. Something about her felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. He didn't know yet that the woman sitting across from him was the same girl he once promised his heart to, the same girl he left to save, the same girl he believed he lost forever. But fate had brought her back to him, and she would not let him die alone. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Sophia taught the town's children in the old meeting house and visited Frank every evening with medicine. His strength rose and fell like waves. Some days he could sit on the porch and watch the sunset. Other days the pain was so strong he could not leave his bed. Still, something inside him changed. He no longer drank himself numb at the saloon. He waited for the sound of her footsteps in the hallway. One cold evening, a harsh coughing fit struck him. Sophia rushed to his room and found him collapsed on the floor, blood on his lips. She hurried to lift him, her voice urgent. "Frank, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered. His voice was barely a whisper. "Sophie." The name struck her heart. He had not spoken it in 15 years, not since the summer they were young. He was drifting into a fever dream, unaware of what he had said. But it told her the truth. The man she once loved was still inside him. She sat beside him through the night, holding his hand as he slept. Her mind returned to the summer of 1860, when she was 17 and he had been a wounded soldier, healing at her aunt's farm in Maryland. Before the war hardened him, before life turned him into a man, people feared. When morning came, Frank woke and found Sophia still in the chair, her head resting near his arm. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the warmth of her hand still holding his. "You stayed all night," he said softly. "You needed care," she replied. "You shouldn't trouble yourself." "It wasn't trouble," she answered, meeting his gaze. "You matter, Frank, even if you think you don't." Frank had no answer. He felt unworthy of such kindness. Later that week, snow began to fall over Redemption Creek, coating the town in white. Sophia entered Frank's room that evening carrying 2 mugs. "Hot chocolate?" she said with a smile. "Mrs. Hudson made it. I thought we could share some warmth." Frank accepted the drink with surprise. "Hot chocolate? Haven't had this since I was a boy." Sophia sat near the stove while Frank sat on the bed, wrapped in a blanket. They talked about simple things at first. Childhood memories, books, sunsets in different states. Then her voice softened. "Franklin Wesley." The mug nearly slipped from his hand. Only one person had ever spoken his full name that way. "Franklin Wesley," she repeated. "The name you used when we met at my aunt's farm." Frank stared at her, frozen. The world seemed to fall silent. The crackle of the fire and the wind outside were distant sounds now. "Sophie." The name left his lips like a prayer. She nodded slowly. "Yes." "It's me." For a moment, neither moved. Then everything he had locked inside for years rushed back at once. The farm, her laughter, her hand in his, the night he left. "They told me you died," Frank said, his voice tight, "that the Union burned the farm and no one survived." Sophie, he once loved, had tears in her eyes. "We escaped. We fled to Philadelphia. I heard you were killed in a skirmish near Harper's Ferry." Quote. Frank looked away, pain filling his face. "I almost was. By the time I recovered, the war ended. I tried to find you, but when I heard about the farm, I thought you were gone. I thought leaving was the only way to keep you safe." "And after the war, you became someone feared," she whispered. "A gunslinger." "I became what the world pushed me to be," he said quietly. "But the stories aren't all true. Some are. Enough that I regret the man I became." Sophia took his hands. "We both changed. We lived separate lives. But the part that loved you didn't die." Frank swallowed hard. "Why did you come?" "Because the letter said you were dying," she said, her voice trembling. "I could not let your life end without seeing you again." Frank touched her cheek gently. "I never stopped loving you, Sophie." Before she could answer, loud voices came from downstairs. Footsteps rushed up the stairs. The door flew open. Sheriff Davis entered, followed by two men wearing dark coats and stern expressions. "Frank Wesley," the sheriff said. "These men are U.S. Marshals. They have a warrant for your arrest." Sophia stepped in front of Frank. "For what?" "He has barely left his room." "Murder of Judge Harold Abernathy in Cheyenne 3 months ago," one marshal said. Sophia shook her head. "He was in Denver then." "I can prove it. The doctor can confirm." The marshal ignored her. "He matches the description. He's coming with us." Frank spoke calmly. "I'll go peacefully." "No need for trouble." Sophia grabbed his arm. "Franklin, no, you'll die on the road." His eyes softened. "It's all right, Sophie. The truth will come out." But as they led him away, fear filled her. She had just found him. She could not lose him again. The next morning, Sophia sent telegraphs to the Denver doctor and a lawyer she knew. She learned where the marshals planned to take him next, Copper Ridge. She packed medicine, warm clothes, and the small revolver Mrs. Hudson pressed into her hand. "You're going after him," the older woman said. "Yes. I won't let him die alone in a jail cell." Mrs. Hudson nodded. "Then go, and may God keep you safe." Quote. The trail to Copper Ridge was covered in snow. The wind cut through her coat, but she pushed forward. She reached the town by afternoon and went straight to the sheriff's office. The deputy allowed her to see Frank. He looked worse than before. Feverish, weak, his breath shallow. "Sophie," he whispered, "those men aren't marshals. They're bounty hunters." Sophia froze. "Are you sure?" Quote, "They want the old price on my head from Tennessee," he said weakly. "They'll kill me once they get far enough." Her heart pounded. She waited until the deputy fell asleep at his desk. She used a cloth with medicine to keep him asleep. Unlocking Frank's cell, she helped him stand. "We're leaving now," she whispered. "I won't let them take you." They escaped into the cold night and rode north to an old hunting cabin. Frank's fever rose. His strength faded more. Sophia fought to keep him alive, warming him, giving medicine, refusing to let him slip away. "You're not alone," she said again and again. "Not this time." As the fire crackled, Frank whispered through pain, "They said I'd die alone." Quote. Sophia held his hand, tears falling. "Not today, my love, not today." Outside, horses approached through the snow. She reached for the gun, ready to defend him. But when the door burst open, it was Sheriff Davis and 2 real U.S. Marshals. The bounty hunters had been arrested. Frank was free. He would not die a hunted man. But his illness had taken more of him. There was no turning it back now. Yet, in his last days, he would have peace and love. And the woman he once lost, sitting beside him. Wait, before we move on. What do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. 2 days later, a wagon carried Frank and Sophia back to Redemption Creek. Frank lay on a mattress in the back, wrapped in blankets while Sophia sat beside him, holding his hand throughout the journey. His breathing was weak, but there was a quiet peace in his eyes. He was no longer running, no longer hunted, no longer hiding from who he was. Mrs. Hudson rushed outside when the wagon stopped. "Good heavens, Mr. Wesley, you look half frozen. Bring him in at once." She fussed over them, tucking blankets around Frank and scolding Sophia for risking her life. But her voice shook with relief. "You brought him home. Thank God you brought him home." Redemption Creek changed toward Frank after hearing what happened. The town that once whispered about him now offered warm meals, blankets, and kind words. The children he had helped by encouraging Sophia's school left small gifts by his door: drawings, cookies, little wildflowers. Dr. Pearson examined Frank carefully, then spoke to Sophia in the hallway. His tone was gentle. "He's very weak. The journey and cold have hastened the illness. He doesn't have long. I'm sorry, Miss Nolan." Sophia's heart broke, but she nodded. "Thank you, doctor. I'll take care of him." That night, Sophia sat beside Frank's bed reading a book of poems. Her voice was soft as she read, trying to bring him comfort. Frank listened with a faint smile, his eyes half open. "You always like poetry," she whispered. "I liked hearing you read it," he replied. "Your voice always made the words feel like they mattered." Quote. He grew quiet for a moment. Then, with great effort, he reached for her hand. "Sophie, there's something I want to ask." She leaned close. "Anything." "Marry me." The words landed between them like a tender miracle. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Franklin, your body is weak. You don't need to." "I know I don't need to," he whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. "But I want to. After everything, I want to call you my wife. Even if it's only for a little while. I've loved you for 15 years, Sophie. Let me die as your husband." Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Mrs. Hudson cried when she heard the news and quickly began preparing. Word spread, and the town came together. They decorated Frank's room with pine branches and winter berries. The Reverend arrived the next morning expecting a final prayer, but instead he was asked to perform a wedding. Frank wore a clean shirt, and though he could not stand, Sheriff Davis helped him sit upright. Sophia wore her best blue dress. The small room filled with warmth as familiar faces gathered. Mrs. Hudson stood beside Sophia. Sheriff Davis stood beside Frank. "Dearly beloved," the Reverend began, "we are gathered here to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple but full of emotion. Frank's hands trembled as he slid a simple gold ring onto Sophia's finger. Sophia placed a ring on his finger too, kissing his hand as she did. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend said. "What God has joined together, let no man separate." Sophia leaned down and kissed Frank. The room clapped softly, wiping tears from their eyes. "Mrs. Wesley," Frank whispered with a small smile. "Sounds like a dream." "It's real," she said softly. "For however long we have, it's real." The next several days were the happiest and saddest of their lives. They shared stories, memories, laughter, and tears. Sophia read to him. Frank spoke about sunrises he had seen across the west, places he wished he could have shown her, moments he wished he could relive. They dreamed together of a life they never got to have, children running through a yard, a home filled with books and music, growing old side by side. But there was no bitterness, only love, only gratitude that they had found each other again, even at the end. On the 6th day before sunrise, Frank woke with unusual strength. "Help me to the window," he whispered. Sophia helped him sit in a chair by the window. The sky was soft pink and gold as the sun rose over the snowy mountains. Frank watched quietly, his breathing slow. "Sophie," he said after a long silence, "thank you for finding me. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for loving me still." Tears filled her eyes. "Loving you never stopped, Franklin, not for one moment." His hand trembled as he reached for her cheek. "Promise me something. Anything." When I'm gone, don't spend your life in sorrow. Live, teach, travel, find joy again. Don't let my death steal the rest of your life." Her voice cracked as she answered, "I promise to live, but I will love you all my life." As afternoon came, Frank's body weakened. His breaths grew harder. Dr. Pearson gave him medicine to ease his pain. Sophia lay beside him, holding him in her arms. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and peaceful. Frank's voice was faint, barely a whisper. "Remember the horses in Montana running free at sunrise? Most beautiful thing I ever saw." "Tell me more," she whispered, stroking his hair. "They were like the sunrise itself," he said. "Wild, free, nothing could break them." He paused, gathering his last bit of strength. "Some loves are like that too. They never lose their spirit, even when the world tries to break them." Sophia's tears slipped onto his cheek. "I'm here, Franklin. I'm right here." He managed a small smile. "They said I'd die alone." Sophia pressed her forehead to his, her voice steady through her tears. "Not today, my love, not today." A soft breath escaped his lips. The room grew still. Frank Wesley was gone. Sophia held him until the last light of day faded, her heart breaking but full of a love that would never leave her. Spring returned to Redemption Creek. Flowers bloomed across the fields. Sophia continued teaching at the schoolhouse, pouring love into the children who made the town's future brighter. On a warm day in May, she placed wildflowers at Frank's grave. His headstone read, "Franklin James Wesley, beloved husband, whose love outlasted time." She sat beside the grave and spoke softly. "I'm living, just like I promised, and I'm carrying you with me." As she stood to leave, she noticed a single yellow daffodil growing beside his headstone. Bright and alive, just like the memory of their love. Sophia smiled through tears. "Not a tragedy after all, Franklin. Our love lived, and it still does." And somewhere in the softness of the breeze, she felt him close, no longer alone and never forgotten.